A racist cop slaps a woman outside a Chicago diner, calling her one of those people not knowing she's a federal judge. 4 minutes later, the video goes viral. But this isn't just a story of public outrage. This is the beginning of the collapse of a corrupt empire. As whistleblowers rise, sealed files resurface, and a city demands justice, one woman's silence becomes the loudest voice in the courtroom. What began with a slap ends with a revolution. This isn't just about one cop. It's about what happens when the system strikes the wrong woman and she strikes back. Story details as follows. Chicago winters have a way of cutting through the bones. That evening, the wind off Lake Michigan slapped my face harder than any gavel I'd ever brought down. I had just left the courthouse, the weight of another wrongful conviction case still fresh in my chest, one more black boy swallowed by the system. I didn't wear my robe, no entourage, no town car, just a thick wool coat, gloves, and a quiet heart. I liked to walk. It cleared the static from my mind. In a city like Chicago, every block holds a memory or a ghost. And that night, I needed both. The diner on 9th and Monroe was my usual stop. Small, warm, and unpretentious. They knew my order by heart: chicken noodle soup, extra crackers. I pushed open the door, the little bell jingling above, and was met with familiar smiles. But I didn't make it inside. The door hadn't even swung shut behind me before I heard the command. Hey, you step away from the building. I turned. A patrol car, lights off, sat parked across the street. From it emerged a white officer in his mid-40s, tall, broad, with a swagger that said he owned every inch of the sidewalk. His hand hovered near his belt, where a flashlight swung like a loaded question. "Did you hear me, lady?" I said. "Move it along." I blinked, confused at first. "Excuse me. Don't act dumb. Loitering's not allowed." "Let's go." I took a step back. My breath steamed in the air between us. "Officer, I'm just getting dinner." "Dinner," he sneered. "This is a business, not a soup line." I stood still. Something in me said not to move. Not yet. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was generational trauma thick in my bones. Maybe it was the memory of my father, bloodied and arrested in '68 for walking while black. "Is there a problem here?" I asked, calm but firm. "The problem is people like you thinking you can stand around doing nothing. People like me." He stepped forward now, inches away, his voice low. "Don't play the attitude game with me. I've had a long shift. Move now. I'll wait for my food in peace, officer." And that was it. A slap, sharp, open-palmed, and unprovoked, cracked across my left cheek. It echoed louder than the traffic, louder than my heartbeat, louder than the stunned silence of everyone inside the diner watching through the window. I staggered back, but didn't fall. My cheek burned, not just from the sting, but from the injustice. Time slowed. Across the street I saw a teenage boy with a phone out. He hadn't said a word. Just stood there frozen, but filming, eyes wide as truth. The officer saw him too. His expression faltered. He turned back to me, suddenly unsure. "You think a phone changes anything?" I said nothing. "Not yet." I steadied myself, nodded once to the boy, and turned away. My hands trembled. Not from fear, from the force of restraint. I didn't tell him who I was. That would have been too easy. I wanted him to feel that certainty, that belief that he could do anything to anyone and walk away. Because that's what they always believe, until they can't. I walked 3 blocks to my apartment, lips sealed. The heat in my cheek now matched the heat in my soul. I stood in my bathroom mirror, unwrapping my scarf. The skin was red, swollen, but not bleeding. No robe, no badge, no courtroom. But I was still a judge, the highest-ranking black female federal judge in the Northern District of Illinois. And that man had just struck me like I was nothing. My phone rang. My clerk, Denise. "Judge Beckett, something's happening on social media. I think you need to see this." 2 hours later, the video had been shared over 500,000 times. The hashtags started trending. Judge Beckett, slapped by the state, sucked 4 minutes of silence. I didn't sleep that night. The boy's footage played on loop in my mind. Not just the violence, but the expression on the officer's face. Power without fear. Authority without consequence. He had no idea who I was. And that, ironically, was what made the video so powerful. Because that night I was just another black woman in America being policed for breathing. The next morning, the mayor's office called. Then the Chief Justice. Then the press. They wanted statements. They wanted apologies. They wanted to control the narrative. But I already knew the truth. This wasn't about me. This was about every person whose case I'd ever presided over, and wondered if justice had truly been served. It was about the kids in holding cells who never got a camera on their side. It was about my father. I made a decision. I stood in front of my closet and stared at my black robe. Then I reached for the gray wool coat from the night before. Wrinkled, still faintly smelling of diner soup and injustice. I wore it again. By 11 a.m., the courthouse steps were packed with reporters. Denise stood beside me holding my notes. I took the podium with no notes, no makeup, no mask. My name is Lorraine Beckett. Last night I was assaulted on the streets of Chicago. Not because I did something wrong, but because someone thought they could. Because I wasn't wearing a title. Because to him I was just another black woman in a city that's gotten too used to bruises that don't make the news. I paused. I am Judge Lorraine Beckett, and I have served the people of this city for 27 years. And last night, I was treated like less than human. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. I raised my hand. The man who struck me was Officer Richard Donner. This isn't about revenge. It's about a system where this is allowed to happen at all. And it ends now. Silence. Then applause. Then a roar. Back inside, Denise pulled me into an empty chamber. "What happens now?" she asked. I looked out the window at the crowd still swelling on the steps. "Now," I said quietly, "now their empire begins to crumble. If Chapter 1 of this story ended with a slap, then Chapter 2 began with a fire." By dawn, the city was awake and angry, not because a judge had been assaulted, but because a system had been exposed. The video had gone viral, yes, but something deeper had gone viral too. The unbearable familiarity. That feeling of seeing once again a black woman being humiliated by someone who thought he had the right. The city's pain didn't come from surprise. It came from repetition. The moment I revealed my name on the courthouse steps, everything shifted. Not for me. I had known who I was every second of that night, but for them. For the reporters, the politicians, the spin doctors watching from behind glass windows and marble columns. Their jaws clenched. Some scribbled. Others just stared. And I saw it clearly. The machine had just broken a piece of itself. By noon, the mayor's press secretary requested a closed-door meeting. "Judge Beckett, Mayor Higgins would like to speak with you off the record." I declined. I told Denise, my clerk, to send a statement instead. It was short and sharp. When this city starts protecting its people with the same energy it protects its power, I'll listen. Meanwhile, the video kept climbing. 4 minutes. That's all it was. 4 shaky minutes from a teenage boy's phone shaky but truthful, and the boy. His name was Devonte Clark, 15 years old sophomore at Booker T. Washington High. His mother called the courthouse to say thank you. But it was I who owed him everything. He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He just filmed. By late afternoon, I stood again in public, this time at Booker T. Washington High School. "Devonte," I said into the mic in the gymnasium, "you held a mirror up to this city. And it didn't like what it saw. But it needed to see it." The applause from the students was thunderous. Young faces eager and raw, looking at me like I was something between a survivor and a soldier. Maybe I was both. Maybe we all were. That night I poured myself a glass of scotch, my first in years, and opened my father's old notebook. The one he had carried during the civil rights marches. Tucked inside was a yellowed photograph of him being clubbed by an officer in 1968. I studied it now with new eyes. The baton, the sidewalk, the blood, all of it too familiar. "It's still happening, Daddy," I whispered. "But I'm not walking away this time." The next morning, the police department gave its first public response. Chief Delaney stood grim-faced, flanked by white-shirted brass. He looked like a man dragged to his own funeral. "We are aware of the incident involving Judge Beckett and Officer Richard Donner," he said, voice tight. "The department has placed Officer Donner on administrative leave pending full investigation." Leave pending. I almost laughed. I walked out of chambers and directly into the hallway where a dozen reporters were waiting. One of them thrust a mic toward me. "Judge Beckett, what's your response to the officer being placed on leave?" I looked her dead in the eye. If you slap a federal judge in broad daylight on camera, and your punishment is leave, that's not a justice system. That's a country club. The hallway fell into stunned silence. I walked away. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. My old law professor, retired now, called me. "Lorraine," he said, his voice gravelly with age. "You've forced the city's hand, but they'll fight like hell to keep it closed. Are you ready for what comes next?" "I was born ready," I said, "and I'm not alone." But it wasn't just politicians and police who were watching. It was people, real people, flooding the courthouse steps with candles, signs, songs. Students marched from Devonte's school to the precinct, holding signs that read, "Her silence was louder than his violence." 4 minutes changed everything. Your badge can't stop the truth. And that's when the calls started. Mothers, wives, widows, all of them ringing my chambers, telling stories that had never seen the light of a courtroom. One voice cracked over the phone. He did the same to my son, Judge Beckett. Same officer. They said it was my son's fault. I wrote her name down, then another, then 5 more. A pattern was forming, a blueprint of abuse. And Richard Donner was not an outlier. He was a cornerstone. I stayed late in chambers that night. Denise had gone home. The courthouse lights dimmed. But I sat in the dark alone with the names, the files, the ghosts. I pulled Donner's record again, this time more carefully. Sealed complaints. Internal affairs reviews that vanished. One file in particular stood out. It was dated 5 years ago. Excessive force, civilian minor. File closed due to insufficient evidence. Attached was a redacted witness statement. But the signature at the bottom, initialed SB. I froze. That was Sergeant Brenda Morales, the only black female sergeant in Donner's unit. Still active. My pulse quickened. I knew her. We'd met at a legal outreach panel once. She'd shaken my hand like someone who was carrying secrets. Now I realized she had been trying to warn us. I reached out through back channels. No official subpoenas. Not yet. Just a letter handwritten. I think you tried to stop him once I wrote, and I think they punished you for it. If you're still willing to speak, I'm listening now." At 3:14 a.m., a knock sounded at my building's door. A courier, no name, just a package, inside a USB drive and a note. "For your eyes only. It's time." I played the footage on my laptop, hands shaking. It was dash cam video, grainy, black and white, but devastating. Officer Donner. 2 teenagers on the ground. One boy crying. Donner's voice cold and calm. "Stop resisting." "I'm not resisting, sir. Please. Please." A crack. A scream. Then silence. The file time-stamped June 17th, 2020. The name of the boy, Elijah Harmon. 17. Dead 2 days later. The cause listed overdose. But in that video, Elijah wasn't high. He was just black and alive. And then he wasn't. My tears came then. Hot, violent, unapologetic. Not for me, not for my bruised cheek, but for the boy. For every Elijah, for a justice system that waited until it happened to someone important to pay attention. I closed the laptop. My heart wasn't just beating, it was roaring. "You opened the wrong door, Officer Donner," I whispered. And now we walk through it. Outside, the city moved under moonlight. Tired, broken, but not defeated. And neither was I. Because the world had finally seen the truth, and I intended to make them feel it next. Justice doesn't come like a storm. It comes like a leak, slow, relentless, quietly cracking through the marble until one day the whole damn ceiling collapses. That week I began tracing the fault lines. What I found was worse than I had imagined. I sat in my chambers surrounded by files. No courtroom drama, no jury gasps, just the quiet, methodical peeling back of years of cover-ups. Each folder bore the stamp of silence. Case closed. Insufficient evidence. Internal review, no violation found. But between the lines I saw the rot. Officer Richard Donner wasn't a bad apple. He was the orchard, and he had been protected by captains, by city attorneys, by union lawyers, by judges. Yes, even some of my own. I started with Elijah Harmon, the boy in the leaked footage. I called the coroner's office. I requested the full toxicology report under judicial authority. 2 hours later, I received a response. The report had been misfiled. I ordered it anyway, and when it arrived, my stomach turned. Negative for narcotics. No signs of internal overdose. Multiple contusions on the skull and ribs. Yet the cause of death, accidental overdose suspected fentanyl. A lie, a neat one, clean and deadly. They had killed that boy twice, once with force and again with paperwork. That night I stared at the mirror in my bathroom. I didn't see a judge. I saw a woman trapped in a city built on concrete lies and golden shields, and I couldn't breathe unless I tore it all down. The next morning I walked into the Federal Records Department and requested sealed files on past use-of-force complaints related to Donner's Precinct District 17. The clerk behind the counter raised an eyebrow. "Judge Beckett, those files aren't under your jurisdiction." "I'm not asking," I said, flashing my badge. "I'm ordering." An hour later, a box was wheeled into my chambers. Inside, decades of silence. One name came up again and again, Captain Mark Trubell. His signature was on the dismissals of at least 9 excessive force complaints against Donner. He wasn't just looking the other way. He was signing off on the violence. I asked Denise to help me chart it. We covered my office wall with notes and strings like some detective show. One red line led to Officer Simmons Donner's old partner, reassigned to desk duty after a civilian altercation. Another led to D.A. Halpern, who refused to prosecute any misconduct case against District 17's officers in the past 12 years. The web spread fast. We weren't dealing with a rogue cop. We were staring into the belly of a beast. That same afternoon, my office received an anonymous envelope. Inside a flash drive and a typed letter, Judge Beckett. They've buried more than files. The tape you saw isn't the only one. Check the City Evidence Locker Archive, Vault 8B. A friend. It felt like a trap, so I made it public. That night, I stood in front of a live television audience on Chicago Public Access. Someone sent me evidence. Evidence that could unravel the protection racket hiding behind the badge. If I disappear, if I am silenced, know this, I did not go quietly. And I won't go alone. That clip got 11 million views in 3 days. Suddenly, I wasn't just a judge. I was a fuse. The mayor's office tried again. This time, a city attorney knocked on my chamber's door personally. Judge Beckett, we believe you're overstepping your authority. We ask that you recuse yourself from any case involving the Chicago PD moving forward. I laughed. Overstepping. You should try being stepped on for 50 years. This isn't an overstep. It's a reckoning. Then came the bombshell. Sergeant Brenda Morales walked into my office. Not in uniform, no lawyers, just her. Her truth. And a look in her eyes that said, I'm done being afraid. She sat across from me and opened a small, leather-bound notebook. Pages filled with her own handwritten logs. Times, dates, names. She had recorded everything. I tried going to Internal Affairs 2 years ago, she said, voice tight. They told me to stand down. Said I was creating tension among the ranks. Donner, worse than you know, she said. He brags about who he's hit. Laughs about the settlements. He used to say, I don't get paid to be polite. I get paid to be in control. Why are you coming forward now, I asked. She paused. Because when I saw that video and I realized who he slapped, I knew the system had finally messed with the wrong one. I thanked her, and then I did what I never thought I'd do. I hugged her. She cried on my shoulder, and I whispered, You're not alone anymore. The next day, I filed a motion with the U.S. District Court. I was petitioning a full federal review of Chicago's 17th Precinct, every complaint, every dismissal, every lost piece of evidence. Within hours, the Attorney General's office called. We've been waiting for someone brave enough to blow the whistle from inside, they said. We're listening. Meanwhile, Donner had gone silent. No public statement. No apology. He thought if he laid low long enough it would pass. But we weren't done, because while he stayed quiet more, voices rose. A man in Hyde Park stepped forward. Beaten in 2016. A woman from Englewood. Wrongfully arrested in 2019. Lost her baby in jail. Their stories flooded the airwaves. A choir of the unheard. By week's end, something shifted. The Chicago Police Union, long known for shielding its own, issued a statement. We stand against abuse of power in all forms. If Officer Donner is found guilty, we will support full consequences. I didn't believe them, but I knew something big had cracked. The blue wall was bleeding. That night, I returned to the diner where it all started. This time, I was greeted like a returning hero. The manager hugged me. Customers clapped. Devante was there too. I hadn't expected that. He approached holding his phone. Judge Beckett. I filmed something else. What do you mean? The minute after you walked away. He said something. The mic picked it up. I didn't catch it before. But now, listen. He hit play, and there it was. Donner's voice, low and cruel. That's the problem with these people. They don't know their place. My stomach twisted. Send me that clip, I said. The city needs to hear it. We released it that night. The clip shattered any remaining doubt. This wasn't stress. This wasn't a long shift. This was racism. Naked. Violent. Institutional. Chicago woke up angry the next morning. And this time, it wasn't just activists. It was nurses, firefighters, teachers, grandmothers, students. Marches flooded Grant Park, not chanting my name, but chanting something better. Justice for Elijah. Justice for us all. And in that moment, I realized something. I was no longer just the slapped judge. I was a symbol, and symbols don't flinch. They lead. There's a sound that only happens in courtrooms. The heavy shuffle of feet as defendants are led in chains. The low murmur of lawyers murmuring lies like prayers. The echo of a gavel hitting wood, sharp, final, cold. But on this day, the sound was different. Because on this day, the people weren't just watching. They were waiting. It was a Friday. My docket was full, but one case had clawed its way to the top. People v. Jasmine Rowe. Black, female, 22. Charged with assaulting an officer during a traffic stop. The arresting officer Simmons. Donner's former partner. The incident occurred a year ago. She'd pleaded not guilty. She'd begged for body cam footage that couldn't be located. When I read the file again with new eyes, my blood boiled. This was no assault. This was retaliation. This was how they cleaned up their messes by turning victims into suspects. The moment she entered the courtroom, chained at the wrists and ankles, the air went still. She looked like she hadn't slept in a year, eyes sunken, shoulders curled in like someone bracing for impact. Her public defender whispered to her, but she didn't look up. That's when I leaned forward and asked one question. Miss Rowe, were you ever shown the footage of your traffic stop? She shook her head. Did anyone explain why it was unavailable? Her voice cracked. They said the camera malfunctioned. And do you believe that she looked at me, finally, really looked at me? No, ma'am. I think they wanted me to disappear. The courtroom was silent. Even the prosecutor shifted in his seat. I turned to the prosecution table. Do you have any objection to me requesting city security footage from adjacent buildings at the time of the stop? The ADA blinked, fumbled, then said, no, Your Honor. I nodded, because I've already done so, gasps, and I've seen it. A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. I hit the gavel. Silence. I turned back to Jasmine. You were pulled from your car. You were thrown to the ground. The officer struck you twice, then radioed for backup and claimed you assaulted him. Jasmine began to cry, hands trembling in chains. It's on camera, and it's damning. Miss Rowe, I am vacating your charges immediately, and I'm ordering a formal investigation into Officer Simmons and all traffic stops conducted under his badge. The courtroom erupted, not in chaos, but in applause. Cheers. Tears. The bailiff tried to quiet the room, but I raised my hand. Let them feel it. Jasmine collapsed into her lawyer's arms. I stood, my voice ringing. This court is not a conveyor belt for oppression. It is not a stage for lies in uniforms. If justice does not live here, it will not live anywhere. Dismissed. That night, the footage I referenced was leaked, whether by the DA's office or someone else, I don't know. But it didn't matter. The world saw Jasmine's truth, her face, her pain, and it was undeniable. Calls began pouring into my chambers. Other judges, clerks, even prosecutors who'd stayed silent for years. I've seen things, Judge Beckett. Things I didn't speak on. But I will now. I thought the system was untouchable. You proved otherwise. You gave us permission to stand up. But it wasn't permission they needed. It was a spark. And something bigger was catching fire. That weekend, the city held its largest protest in 10 years. Grant Park overflowed. From the steps of the Art Institute to the river, people stood shoulder to shoulder, not just marching but demanding. Reopen the cases, prosecute the officers, retrain the judges, rebuild the system. Sergeant Morales spoke publicly for the first time. She told the story of being silenced, mocked, nearly transferred after she filed her first complaint against Donner. She held up the original memo she wrote a photocopy with red ink crossing out entire paragraphs. "They buried my words," she said, voice steady. "But they couldn't bury my memory." She handed the paper to Devontae Clark, the boy who filmed my assault. "The old world is afraid of the new one," she told him, "and that's why we're going to win." Meanwhile, Donner's attorney tried to get ahead of the storm. He released a video Donner, stiff and grim-faced, sitting in a leather chair. I was under stress. The city has changed. Policing has become a war zone. I didn't know who she was. That last line was his defense, as if slapping a federal judge was the problem, not slapping anyone. The next day, I received a package. No return address. Inside a photo. My face from the night of the slap frozen mid-impact. Across the bottom in red ink. Next time, it'll be more than a slap. Denise panicked. Security wanted to relocate me. The U.S. Marshals offered protection. I refused. If I go into hiding, I told them they win. I'm not scared of shadows. But I was scared. Not for myself. For what would happen if I gave up now. If I let this moment pass like so many before it. Because I'd seen it happen. Momentum fade. Anger cool. And the machine reset. But not this time. That Monday, I returned to court. New case, new defendant. This one, a man accused of vandalizing a police precinct window during protests. The prosecution called it terrorism. I called it grief with broken glass. He received probation and mandatory community service. But before I ended the session, I said something I hadn't planned. Some of you think this courtroom is crumbling. It is, because it was built wrong. And maybe, just maybe, it's time we built it again. Outside, cameras waited. I stepped up to the mics. I will not try Officer Donner's case. I've recused myself because justice is not personal, it's principle. But I will continue to preside over this city's transformation. Because what happened to me is nothing compared to what's happened to thousands who didn't wear a robe, who didn't have a camera, who didn't make it out. One reporter asked, "What do you hope to achieve, Judge Beckett?" I paused. "I want to make it unsafe to be corrupt again." That night I walked alone. Same block where it happened. Different feeling. Now people stopped me, not with fear, but with fire. A woman pressed her hand to my shoulder. "You made them see us." A man tipped his cap. "Thank you for not backing down." Even Devontae texted me. "If you ever run for mayor, let me be your cameraman." The empire hadn't collapsed yet, but it was leaning, and I could feel the bricks loosening under the weight of truth. Every city has walls. Concrete ones, legal ones, invisible ones. But in Chicago, the hardest wall to break has always been the blue wall of silence. That unspoken code that says, protect your own no matter the cost. That wall had held firm for decades, until now. I sat in my chambers surrounded by transcripts, leaked reports, handwritten letters from people I'd never met. The weight of all of it pressed against me. But for once I wasn't alone in the fight, because something extraordinary was happening. Cops were starting to talk. It began with a press conference no one expected. 3 retired officers. 2 Black, 1 Latino stood in front of the old precinct building on the west side. The one now graffitied with "Justice Lives Here." Their faces were solemn. Their voices were firm. "We were part of the silence," said Officer Miguel Soto. "We laughed off complaints. We called it brotherhood. But it was complicity. And we're done pretending." Gasps. Donner wasn't a mistake, said Officer Ruth Hightower. He was the product of a system that rewarded brutality and punished decency. We want a full, independent review of everything, from the top brass to the union leadership. It was like hearing a dam break. Within hours, the precinct's current officers issued an anonymous open letter. One paragraph hit me in the gut. To Judge Beckett. We watched what happened to you and we saw ourselves. Some of us are trapped in a system that punishes restraint and promotes aggression. We want change, but we need protection. They were breaking the wall from the inside, and it was working. The mayor could no longer afford silence. That evening, Mayor Higgins held a televised address from City Hall. He looked tired, sweating through his collar. In light of recent revelations, I am ordering an immediate review of all disciplinary records in the Chicago Police Department. Effective immediately, Officer Richard Donner is terminated, and we will cooperate fully with the federal investigation. It wasn't repentance. It was survival, but it was a crack. A meaningful one. The reaction, mixed. Some said it was too little too late. Others said it was the first time they'd felt hope in years. I just kept moving, because I knew what came next would be even harder. That same week, Officer Donner was formally arrested, charged with aggravated battery misconduct and civil rights violations. He arrived at the courthouse in a suit that didn't quite fit, flanked by lawyers' lips tight with contempt. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. He said nothing, but I could see it in his eyes. He still didn't believe this was real. He thought someone would save him. Someone always had, but not this time. The case was assigned to Judge Pennington, one of the most respected jurists in the state. He and I had shared benches, debates, even disagreements, but I trusted him. He wouldn't bend. Meanwhile, Sergeant Brenda Morales, now a public icon, was suspended. Pending internal review, the department claimed. They called it procedural. We called it retaliation. The city reacted immediately. A candlelight vigil was held outside CPD headquarters. Brenda stood beside me that night, her head held high. Her badge, removed, her uniform replaced with a simple white blouse. They can strip the cloth, she whispered, but they can't take my voice. I took the mic and spoke, the city lights glowing behind us. Brenda Morales chose truth over fear. She didn't just break the silence, she set it on fire. If we let them punish her, we're telling every whistleblower to stay quiet. So we don't stay quiet. The next morning, over 1,000 protesters marched in silence from Union Station to the 17th Precinct. No chants, no signs, just silence. And then, one by one, they dropped copies of Brenda's suspension notice at the front doors, a blizzard of paper shame. By day's end, the department reversed course. Brenda Morales was reinstated. No apology. Just a single-line memo status updated to active duty. But we didn't need their apology. The victory belonged to the people. And something else happened that week. The young man who had filmed the original assault, Devontae Clark, was honored by the city council. They tried to hand him a plaque. He refused. I didn't record that video for an award, he said, voice clear. I did it because I didn't want to lie to myself when I looked in the mirror. His mother, tears streaming down her cheeks, embraced him. And I thought to myself, we are raising giants. Donner's arraignment came a week later. The courthouse was overflowing. Journalists, families of past victims, off-duty cops. I stood at the top of the marble stairs watching him walk past the metal detectors, his posture rigid, jaw locked. He wouldn't meet my eyes. But I wasn't here for him. I was here for the dozens he'd silenced, some still living, some buried beneath autopsies, stamped inconclusive. Judge Pennington read the charges slowly. Donner pled not guilty. The room didn't gasp. It didn't need to. We all expected it. He would go down swinging. But we had truth on our side now, and it was landing punches. Outside the courtroom, I saw a woman clutching a photo. She looked 60, maybe older, dressed in Sunday best. I recognized the face in the photo her son, Malcolm Reese. He'd died in police custody in 2015. I wrote your chambers once, she said softly. I never got an answer. But seeing what you're doing now, that's enough. I wanted to apologize. I wanted to say I was sorry for not answering. But all I could do was hold her hand. You're not forgotten, I said. And neither is he. That night I sat in my apartment with the windows open. The city buzzed below sirens. Laughter footsteps echoing off brick. It was still Chicago, still broken, still brutal. But tonight, it felt alive. I lit a candle for Elijah, for Jasmine, for Malcolm, and I wrote 3 words in my journal. Walls can bleed, because they were. The blue wall wasn't just cracked, it was leaking shame, leaking truth, leaking history no one wanted to remember. And the people weren't afraid anymore. Justice doesn't shout. It waits, watches, then drops like a hammer. And on that rainy Tuesday in Chicago, the hammer came down. The trial of Officer Richard Donner opened under gray skies, thunder rumbling in the distance like a prophecy. The courthouse was locked tight with media barricades, federal agents and a line of citizens stretched around the block just to stand outside and witness. They called it the most public police misconduct trial in the city's history. But to me, it was personal, not because of what he did to me, but because of what he represented. He was the face of the machine, and finally someone was putting the machine on trial. Inside, Judge Pennington presided with steel in his voice and fire in his eyes. He addressed the jury. You are not here to judge the police. You are here to judge a man who wore the uniform like a shield for his hatred. I sat in the back row, anonymous in the crowd. Brenda Morales sat beside me, her fists clenched. Devontae Clark was in the row ahead, his camera around his neck, silent, respectful, but ready. The people were present, and so was history. The prosecution began with the video. 4 minutes, the slap, my face, the silence. The teenager's angle caught every second. Gasps filled the courtroom when Donner's voice echoed through the speakers. That's the problem with these people. They don't know their place. The room turned to stone. Even the defense attorney looked like he'd swallowed his tongue. The defense strategy: stress, miscommunication, momentary lapse. They tried to paint Donner as a victim of anti-police sentiment. They called in psychiatrists, former colleagues, even his pastor. None of it worked, because facts don't flinch. Then came the witnesses, each one a piece of the broken puzzle. Jasmine Rowe now free testified tearfully. She recounted the fabricated charges, the violence, the lost year of her life. Brenda Morales, with composure and courage, laid bare years of internal cover-ups, redacted complaints, and suppressed footage. Miguel Soto, retired, told of the time Donner bragged about tuning up kids in alleyways and how complaints were buried under layers of bureaucracy. And then Devontae Clark took the stand. The room went silent as the teen approached the witness box. He straightened his hoodie, cleared his throat. I was just filming, man. I didn't know who she was. I just knew it wasn't right. And I wanted the world to see what we see every day, what we're tired of seeing. When the prosecutor asked why he kept recording, Devontae answered without hesitation, because they only believe us when we bring receipts. His words hit harder than any gavel. Even the jury blinked back tears. The defense floundered. They cross-examined Devontae, trying to poke holes. But he stood firm. A boy, yes, but built from the truth. And then finally, Donner took the stand, smug, unapologetic. He wore a blue tie and a smirk that vanished the moment he opened his mouth. Because the prosecution was waiting. They confronted him with his own reports, discrepancies, contradictions, and, above all, patterns. You struck Judge Beckett because you thought she was just another. Nobody, didn't you? I didn't know who she was. So, if she hadn't been a judge, would your actions have been acceptable? Objection. Overruled. Pennington said, voice razor sharp. Answer the question, officer. Donner paused, swallowed, then said the quiet part out loud. That's how it works out there. Gasps. The courtroom exploded. Pennington slammed the gavel. Order. But the damage was done. In 7 words, Richard Donner had convicted himself. The closing arguments were brutal, surgical. The prosecutor ended with, you do not wear justice. You do not drive justice. You live it or you betray it. Officer Donner chose betrayal. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, then returned with their verdict. Guilty on all counts, aggravated battery, misconduct, civil rights violations, abuse of authority. Donner's face didn't move until Judge Pennington added, sentencing will be swift, the maximum allowed by law. And, let it be known, we are no longer protecting predators in uniform. As Donner was led away, he passed by our row. He looked at me not with anger, with disbelief, as if he still couldn't understand how someone like me had brought down someone like him. But I didn't blink. Outside, the sky opened up and rain poured over the courthouse steps. But no one left. People danced in it. Tears mixed with raindrops. Signs held high. Justice lives here. We saw, we spoke, we won. That night, Chicago felt different. Not healed, but awake. I walked the Riverwalk alone, the same one I'd passed 100 times before, feeling like justice was something I was protecting. Now I knew it was something we had to fight for every day. I lit a candle on the ledge overlooking the water. For every case never seen, every child lost, every scream that was silenced. Then I blew it out, because the wind was picking up, and we were no longer afraid of the dark. 4 minutes. That's how long it took for a man to raise his hand and strike me. That's how long it took a teenager to record the truth. That's how long it took for a city to wake up. But it wasn't just about time. It was about what was revealed in those 4 minutes, and what couldn't be hidden anymore. It's been 4 months since the verdict. Richard Donner now resides in a federal prison in Indiana. 22 years without the possibility of parole. A sentence that still feels lighter than the lives he ruined. But this story was never about him. It was about us, about the cracks in the wall, and the voices that crawled through. The city looks different now. Not cleaner, not gentler, but more honest. The Civilian Review Board I helped establish is fully operational. Now the Harmon Commission, named after Elijah. It's made up of former judges' attorneys and, most importantly, mothers. Women who lost sons. Women who buried the truth too long. They oversee internal investigations. They demand transparency. They walk into precincts with clipboards and the weight of pain that can't be dismissed anymore. I was offered a higher bench, an appellate seat. I turned it down. Why, they asked. Because change doesn't happen from above, I said. It happens where the wounds are still bleeding. Every week I still walk the same street where it happened. Sometimes I get stopped. Sometimes people just look and nod. Sometimes a child points and whispers, "That's her." Not the judge, not the woman who got slapped, just her. And I'm proud of that, because it means they remember. Last week, Devonte Clark got accepted into a university journalism program in New York. He emailed me a picture of his acceptance letter. Subject line 4 minutes started this. Brenda Morales was promoted. Captain Brenda Morales, First Latina woman to ever lead her district, and she wears it like armor. She told me once over coffee, "When I was younger, I thought breaking the silence would break me. Now I know, silence was the real poison." Jasmine Rowe now works with a youth legal defense nonprofit. She said her first client cried when he found out she used to be just like him. "They called me a criminal," she said. "Now I fight to make sure that label dies with me. And me, I write. Not law books, not rulings, but letters. To young girls with questions, to mothers with loss, to strangers who write to say thank you for not backing down." One letter I'll never forget came from a retired officer. He never signed his name, just wrote, "I watched that video and cried, not because of what he did, but because I saw myself in the background. 30 years, and I never stopped him. Never said a word, but I'm saying it now. You reminded me that silence is not neutral. I don't know if that man still wears the badge, but I hope wherever he is, he's found peace in confession." We held a memorial for the victims, not just the famous cases, all of them. We read their names under City Hall lights one by one for 3 hours straight. Each name was answered by a bell toll. At the end, I stepped to the microphone, hands shaking, eyes full, and I said, "This city is not perfect. This system is not healed. But today we remember. And remembering is how we begin to build something better." I didn't expect a standing ovation, but I got one. Not for the speech, but because we were there, together. The next morning, I opened my window and watched the sun climb over the skyline. It was quiet, and for once that silence didn't feel oppressive. It felt earned, like the pause after a long, hard song. I've learned something these last few months. Justice isn't a destination. It's a series of small decisions, daily choices to speak up when it would be easier to stay silent. It's walking into rooms where you are not wanted and staying anyway. It's believing that even when the system is sick, the people inside it can heal it. And sometimes it starts with something as simple as a phone camera and a kid with courage. If you ask me what 4 minutes revealed, I'd say they revealed the truth. They revealed our pain. But more importantly, they revealed our power. Final scene. I sit on a park bench. The courthouse behind me. Wind rustling through the trees. A little black girl rides her scooter past and stops. She stares, squinting. "Are you that judge lady?" I smile. "I am. My mom said you made the city better." I crouch to her level. "Not just me. A lot of people. People like you one day." She beams. "I want to be a judge too." "Then start now," I say. "Speak the truth, even if your voice shakes." She nods and rides off, pink beads clacking in her braids, and I sit back heart full. Because that's how empires fall, and how something braver begins. In just 4 minutes, a cop's hand tried to erase a woman's dignity. But in those same 4 minutes, a teenager captured the truth. And from that truth, a city rose. This story reminds us justice isn't about titles or robes. It's about what we do when no one is watching. It reminds us that silence can be complicity, but one voice, one camera, one act of courage can unravel generations of injustice. We live in a world where power often protects itself until the people no longer allow it. And sometimes change begins not with a revolution, but with a slap seen by millions. If this story moved, you don't stay silent. Drop a comment with your thoughts. Hit subscribe to support more stories that challenge power and uplift truth. And share this video because somewhere out there, someone still believes no one's watching. Let's prove them wrong.